Funeral Blues is a poem by the British poet W. H. Auden, published in 1938. It is a mournful dirge or an elegy as it memorializes someone who had died. It has 16 verses divided into 4 quatrains, or 4-verse stanzas, written in iambic pentameter, with rhyming or heroic couplets, with AABB rhyme scheme. The unknown speaker of the poem experiences grief and mourning over losing someone important to death or heartbreak.
Funeral Blues begins with a list of urgent demands. The speaker wants clocks to stop, telephones to be cut off, dogs to be distracted with bones, and pianos to fall silent. These aren't just practical requests but carry deeper meaning. Asking the clocks to stop is really a cry to freeze time, to hold the moment because something enormous has just happened. Cutting off the phones and silencing the pianos suggests a desire to shut out the noise of everyday life. Business calls, celebrations, all the usual activities suddenly feel unbearable in the face of loss. It becomes clear that someone important to the speaker has died or something deeply personal has ended, like a relationship. Either way, the grief is overwhelming. But what makes it harder is that the world around the speaker doesn't seem to notice. Time keeps moving, people keep talking and living their lives, while the speaker is stuck in heartbreak. There's a strong feeling of being alone in grief, like the world should stop out of respect, but it doesn't. Intense grief can cause a disconnect between a person and the outside world. It's like everything should change, but nothing does. The second stanza is all about public mourning. The speaker wants the entire world, even the sky and the birds and the traffic system, to take part in this grief. There's a strong desire here to make the private pain visible, to have the world acknowledge the loss. It reflects how, when someone close to us dies, our grief can feel so massive and consuming that it seems absurd that life around us just goes on. We want everything to stop and say, this person mattered. There's also a sense of almost ritualistic mourning here, dressing things in black, making symbolic gestures, so it touches on the social aspect of loss, not just the personal. The third stanza brings us into the speaker's personal grief. It shows just how all-encompassing this relationship was. The speaker depended on this person for direction, for daily life, for joy and routine, literally everything. It's not just romantic love that's being mourned here, but the loss of structure, comfort, and identity. That phrase, "I was wrong," is so brutal because it quietly shatters the comforting idea that love is eternal. It's raw, it's honest, and it signals a major emotional turning point, from belief in being in love to facing the brutal reality of loss. The fourth stanza moves into a kind of emotional apocalypse. It's as if the speaker is saying, what's the point of anything anymore? The things that usually represent beauty, stability, and wonder, the stars, the sun, the ocean, are now meaningless. The speaker is overwhelmed by grief to the point where life itself feels empty and pointless. It's the emotional equivalent of wanting the world to end because someone you loved is gone. This final stanza drives home how profound and all-consuming the loss is. Let's thematically analyze Auden's Funeral Blues. Funeral Blues is about how devastating grief can make someone feel totally out of step with the world. Whether the speaker is mourning a death or the end of a relationship, the feeling is the same. The loss is massive and all-consuming. But the world keeps going. The stars still shine, clocks still tick, people still talk, it's business as usual. And that's what hurts most. It feels like the world doesn't care. This indifference makes the speaker's pain even sharper. They want the world to stop and notice, to reflect how broken they feel inside. That's why they imagine dramatic things, planes writing messages in the sky, pigeons dressed in mourning clothes, the sun and moon being shut off. These images might sound extreme, but they show how desperate the speaker is for someone, anyone, to validate their loss. This isn't just a poetic exaggeration, it's an apocalyptic reaction to death. The speaker doesn't want the world to keep turning. They call for the stars to be extinguished, the moon and sun taken down, the oceans poured out, the forests swept away. These aren't just dramatic metaphors, they're symbolic gestures of how completely meaningless the natural world now seems. The structures that usually give life rhythm and beauty, the cosmos, nature, even time, are now unbearable because they continue to exist despite this enormous personal loss. The poem doesn't get caught up in explaining exactly what happened, whether someone died or a love ended. What matters is the emotional truth. The speaker feels like their whole world has collapsed. And part of what makes grief so hard to bear is how lonely it feels. Everyone else is still living their normal lives while you're stuck in a kind of emotional silence. It's not just about sadness but about the isolation that grief brings. The speaker wants the whole world to join in mourning because grieving alone feels unbearable. In the final verse, when the speaker says, "Nothing now can ever come to any good," it sums up the deep hopelessness and emotional devastation that can come with a loss so big that it seems like life itself has lost its meaning. While the speaker never says directly, "I feel alone," the language of the poem tells us that loud and clear. Right from the start, the speaker is shouting orders: stop this, silence that, prevent that sound. But it's not clear who they're talking to. These aren't commands to a specific person, but they're hurled out into the void, almost like someone trying to be heard in a crowd that doesn't stop to notice them. This ambiguity, the absence of a clear listener, emphasizes the speaker's emotional isolation. The world goes on, clocks tick, phones ring, dogs bark, music plays. In other words, the world doesn't stop for grief. And that's what makes the speaker's sorrow even harder to bear. The loss is deeply personal, but life outside carries on, indifferent and unbothered. The speaker's list of commands becomes a kind of wish, a plea for the world to take part in the mourning, to validate the depth of the pain. The second stanza builds on this, imagining grand public gestures of mourning, airplanes writing "He is dead" in the sky, traffic police wearing black gloves. These requests are theatrical, over the top, but they make sense when we understand the speaker's need for connection. They don't want to grieve alone, they want the world to join them. Yet, the intensity of the final stanza, where the speaker declares that nothing good can ever come again, shows that this communal mourning never really happens. The world doesn't change. And so, the speaker is left to sit alone in the silence that follows heartbreak. Let's discuss the important symbolism of Auden's funeral blues. The speaker isn't just asking for clocks to stop because they're loud or annoying, but the speaker wants time itself to pause. When someone close dies, it can feel impossible to keep up with the world's pace. Life just continues, business keeps moving, people go on about their day, but for the speaker, that feels wrong. They want everything to slow down and acknowledge the loss. Clocks, especially in the modern world, represent schedules, deadlines, and commotion. So, stopping them is a way to ask for space, to process the grief, to mourn, and to make room for something more meaningful than routine. It's also a quiet protest against how rushed and unfeeling modern life can be when something truly important, like a death, happens. Telephones stood for modern progress, fast-paced communication, and constant activity. To cut off the telephone is the speaker's way of saying, enough. The speaker doesn't want to be interrupted by news, calls, or the noise of the outside world. In this moment of mourning, he craves silence and stillness. But there's a flip side here too. By cutting off the phone, the speaker also cuts themselves off. So, there's a sense of isolation in his grief. They're not just mourning someone, but they're being left behind in a world that keeps moving, and that's deeply lonely. Right now, the speaker can't bear the sound of cheerful music as it clashes with how heartbroken he feels. That's why they want the pianos to go quiet and be replaced with the muffled drum, which feels more appropriate for mourning. They're essentially asking the world to shut down its celebrations and meet him in their sorrow. It's not just about silence but about emotional alignment. They want the world's mood to match their own. Doves usually symbolize peace and purity, but here, they're not soaring symbols but public like pigeons, living among people in cities. The speaker wants even these ordinary symbols of calm to be dressed in mourning. That shows how overwhelming the grief is. It's not enough for people to mourn, as the speaker wants even nature, even symbols of peace, to visibly reflect this loss. The mourning becomes total, extending beyond human rituals into the everyday world. The speaker is in such despair that he wants the stars, the moon, the sun, all the things that light up and guide the world, to disappear. These aren't just pretty lights in the sky. They stand for hope, dreams, orientation, and purpose. Saying pack up the moon and dismantle the sun is a way of saying nothing matters anymore. Without the person they loved, the speaker sees no point in anything. It's not just sadness but a deep, existential hopelessness. Their whole world has been turned upside down, and there's no light left to guide them forward. When the speaker asks for doves to wear crepe bows and policemen to wear black cotton gloves, it's about making the grief visible. Black has always been a symbol of mourning, but here it is a demand for public grief. The speaker wants the entire world to show its sorrow in how it looks. It's as if their personal loss is so profound that it should affect everyone, not just them. They want mourning to be worn like a uniform, so the outside world reflects the pain inside. Hope you like and share.